Hey, is this thing on? Are we recording? Can I get a tech person? Oh, for the love of Edtech. Hey, Corinne.
Hey, Kara.
How are you today?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm super excited about our guest today. We are talking to Josh Boles from Bellbrook Sugar Creek Schools in Ohio, and I'm really excited to hear his perspective on things.
Yeah, he's the district tech coordinator there, and I think he's going to have a lot of interesting information to share with us.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what he has to say. Joining us today is Josh Boles, who is the district technology coordinator at Bellbrook Sugar Creek Schools in Ohio.
You got it.
Awesome. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you let us con you into this, because I was in a meeting with Josh and I made the comment about being on our podcast. Just kind
He was
of
like, yeah,
nonchalantly.
Sure. Yeah, sounds great.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
And then after the meeting, sent an email saying I wasn't joking. So
Oh, you were serious. Oh.
yes, let's chat. So we're really glad to have you.
No, it's gonna be fun. I was listening to one of your previous ones earlier. It's a lot of fun. I like it.
Good.
Oh, great.
Good.
Thanks. We're international.
Yeah, global.
So because you are a district tech coordinator, can you explain a little bit about what that role entails?
Everything. I do every. No, I'm just kidding. But to a certain extent, like all of the technology that exists in the district, the students use, that the staff use, the teachers use, the admins use, all of it ends up kind of going through me. And that's changed a lot over the past, 10, 20 years, obviously, because it used to be a little bit more segregated. Like there were, the building security systems and the cameras and all those kinds of things were considered sort of maintenance tasks in a lot of the districts
Right.
I've been in. But they all use the internet now. They all connect to the network. They all work through the same pipe. So a lot of that stuff all goes through tech nowadays anyway. Anything that has a data connection goes through me. Anything that touches the Wi-Fi goes through me. So it really is, it's a very umbrella kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Primarily it's the infrastructure to provide internet access, to provide students access to their devices, all those things. But also there's all the curriculum aspects that get tied into that. And I don't do any curriculum design, but I do end up getting drawn into a lot of those conversations because so much of the
Sure.
curriculum is digital. So I stick my fingers into everything. I can't help myself, even if they don't want me to have my fingers in there sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, all the technology in the district ends up kind of going through me in some capacity. It's just a reality of life in 2021 that everything you do uses technology at some
Yeah.
point too.
It
So
really does.
it's expanded quite a bit since I started. But yeah.
And are you the one-man show?
No, I'm
Okay.
lucky. I'm
I
so
was
lucky
gonna
here.
say, I was like, oh my goodness, this
No.
feels like a lot.
I have three other staff members. One of them
Okay.
is contracted from Aveka, and the other two are district employees. We used to have more presence in the buildings, and with funding going the way it is. But
Sure.
I'm lucky. I have a bigger staff than a lot of people end up having for some of these things, which is good. It's still it's a catch-22 because I say I've got a big staff, but it's still a ludicrously small staff for if you took an enterprise environment and said you have to do all of these things, I would have a small army of IT staff.
Right.
And I have myself and three other people, which looks big for the size of the district that we are, and it looks big
Mm-hmm.
for the way schools tend to look at tech because we're still way behind when it comes to support, and we probably always will be. But yeah, if you took my job and put it in a business that had the number of users that we have, they'd laugh at me because it'd be like, no, you need this many people, and that's just the way we do it
Right.
because enterprise environments say
Yeah.
you need this many. There's a formula for it. Even you need this many to support this many users, and we don't look at it quite the same way in schools. But we're getting
Yeah.
there.
That's kind of how things are in schools, right?
Mhm.
Like we do way more with
Yes,
way less.
everybody wears a lot of hats.
So I guess I'm kind of curious, really, how you ended up as the technology coordinator.
it was kind of an interesting road, and I feel like if you ask any technology professional in a school district, they have that same initial response. It's been
Yeah.
an
Response, yeah.
interesting road.
Yep.
I actually started in public libraries, oddly enough. I graduated from college with an English degree in English literature, which is a very useful thing to take to the job market, by the way.
Yep.
Um,
Mhm.
and started working in a public library, and I enjoyed that. I loved books, obviously. I loved libraries up to that point, and there was a big project where they were transitioning their library information system from one to another. So all the data that was in there, all the circulation data, all the cataloging data, all that fun stuff was getting migrated from one system to another. And through some things that I had done while I was there, they kind of stuck me into that project and said, "We want you to be involved with this." And I was like, "Okay." And had to do a lot of the back end stuff, a lot of the technology migration itself, and then we also had to go through and train all the users and how to use the new system. And that whole project was very interesting, and it was way too long, and it was kind of painful because nobody wants change. Um,
Right.
but shepherding that through was very interesting, and I was like, I kind of like this, but the education aspect of it I really liked. I liked helping people learn to use technology. I really liked that too. So eventually I got my master's degree in education in the library media program, which is
Mhm.
where I first met you, Corinne, by the way.
I wondered if you remembered that. Yeah, we got our masters together.
So we went through that same program, and from there I was a school librarian in Beaver Creek, which is another school district here in Ohio, for a couple of years due to the fun nature of
Right.
public school funding. We didn't pass a levy for several cycles, and so they ended up cutting that position. And I moved from there to Fairborn, where I was a technology teacher for 1 year. So a little bit of teaching experience kind of there at the beginning. And while I was in Fairborn, their technology coordinator was retiring. And I'd gotten to know him a little bit because I was helping him with tech stuff there in the school that I was teaching in. And uh, he retired in June, and they posted his position, and I was like, I'm not qualified to do that. I don't have anywhere near the tech background to do that. Like I'm
Right.
teaching. I will keep looking for teaching positions. And he called me and said, Josh, why didn't you apply for my job? And I was like, Randy, I don't know how to do your job. Well, I think you should apply for it. What? And so he kind of talked me into it, and I was like, all right, well, we'll pursue this. And I applied for the position, went through the interview process, kind of told them what I knew and what I didn't know, and they were interested in looking into that, and they ended up hiring me for that job. And so I was the technology coordinator for Fairborn City Schools for a few years. It was quite the trial by fire. They had been
Yeah.
through a long funding drought. There was one night to the next. I can't remember what year it was. It was a few years before I got there, where their technology staff went from a department of 12 down to a department of 2. It
Oh,
just,
wow.
yeah, just
Wow.
huge funding cuts, lots of difficulties with funding at the time. And so they went through this huge drought where the tech department had no budget. It was minimally staffed. Um, and then I inherited that fund.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Welcome.
yes, here is this
Here's
here is
this
this mess.
wonderful mess. Yes.
And I mean, they'd been band-aiding things for years because they just didn't have any money to
Yeah.
Right.
upgrade or to refresh or to do any of those things. So that they did relieve some of the funding things after a couple of years went by and some treasurer staff changed and things like that. So they tried to find more money and put more money into tech, thankfully. But for those first couple of years, it was very interesting. I mean, everything was just old and it needed to be replaced. And it was like, all right, everything needs to be replaced, and we have the money to replace half of that one thing. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
very interesting. But it was also extremely educational because over the course of a couple of years, we pretty much had to refresh everything because it all just
Yeah.
died, and it was just this running
Yeah.
series of cataclysms of what's going to die next. What can we put in its place? So I ended up, getting my hands really dirty and having to mess with every aspect of that technology environment. Things were starting to kind of stabilize after a few years, and then the position here at Bellbrook opened up, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna toss my name in the hat for that. It was the same kind of
Why not?
conversation. It's like I don't really know what I'm doing, but I kind of know what I'm doing when I'm learning what I'm doing, and et cetera, et cetera. And that brought me to my current position here because, and I didn't know it at the time, but Bellbrook was in a very similar sort of state that Fairborn was in when I went there. There were a lot of things that were failing. There were a lot of things that needed to be replaced. Um, and they just needed some help kind of pulling their technology environment out of the fire. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I'm kind of, I don't know, I guess I could see it going both ways. It's kind of shocking that you stuck with it, and yet at the same time, once you get into the weeds, it is the best way to learn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you tend to get one of two kinds of people in administrative tech positions in schools. It's either somebody who has a deep tech background, but they don't have much education background, in which case, they need that exposure, and there's things they need to learn about how schools function and about pedagogy and all that kind of stuff. Or you get the other side, which is what I was. I had more education background, and I'd like to think I had some technology aptitude, but I didn't have any formal tech training at all, other than what I'd given myself. So okay, I've got some education background and I have some teaching experience and I have a master's in education. That's all great. I know about that side of it, but I don't know squat about managing a switch or deploying, enterprise class
Right.
systems or any of that stuff.
Right.
So either way, you're getting somebody who's got to hit the ground running and also pick up all this whole other sphere of skills on the side. So
Yeah.
it's we are an interesting breed of people.
Yeah, but I think it's great that you mentioned that too, because even the people that have more of the tech background that end up doing the job need that education piece,
Yeah.
because I mean,
It's
it
so
is
important.
it's a different world.
It's I mean, I don't know how I I've been through the hiring process at a couple different districts now, and I've never had to like sit in and hire a technology coordinator because I'm usually applying for that job or I'm in that job.
Right.
I
Mhm.
would love to see the list of applicants that they get for when a district level tech position opens, who applies for that? And
Mhm.
like
Right.
what crazy oddball differences are there between all these different bodies of people, because it's just a strange place to kind of exist. It's a lot of fun. It's very interesting. I'm never bored. Dear Lord, I'm never bored. Um, there's always something to do. There's always problems that need to be solved, which I kind of like. And at the same time, let's be realistic. We were talking about it earlier. You are constantly under resourced. You
Mhm.
never have the
Right.
resources that you need to accomplish the tasks that you need to accomplish, really to the level that you want to accomplish them. Everything is
Right.
triage all the time because you're consistently understaffed, and it's just interesting the way that it all comes together. And it's not just the tech side of that. That's public education in general. Teachers never have the time
Right.
that they need or the resources that they need. They never
Yeah.
have any of those things. And I would argue that their job is harder than what I do. I taught for a few years. I know a little bit about what that's like. And I have shifted out of teaching into an education support position because it's very
Right.
difficult and it's very time consuming. And it's just so, and I don't want to get off on it too much, but it's such an interesting way that our public schools function, at least in my experience and in this
Mhm.
area, with
Mhm.
everybody constantly having to put on so many hats and constantly having to do so much. And I don't want to imply that, the business world doesn't have that functioning as well, but I know in the education community, it's a consistent thing. You never have the resources that you need to really
Right.
do what you want to do. And so you're constantly having to balance that reality against the fact that what you are doing is extremely valuable and is hugely important and is necessary. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you have spoke on that.
yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the like kind of staying in the same realm and on the topic of, teachers and resources, we know that now there are so many digital resources for educators to use. So, from your side of things, what does that process look like? Because now, and this is just coming from me, who's former teacher, there are so many things that when I selected something I wanted my kids to use, that I didn't think about, like the age
Mhm.
restrictions or what the company's using their data for, or all of those pieces. I'm like, oh, oh.
Like you didn't consider that. It's the yeah.
Nobody ever does.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
used to have like a request type form that you could
Mhm.
submit if you wanted like them to review an app or something for use. And I would get so confused if it got rejected because I'm thinking, why? And then I'm like, oh, because they're under 13.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that that was like a thing. So I want you to speak on app selection and how, like, what that all looks like from your side of things.
Yeah, and I mean that was a perfect segue because you're right. There are zillions of apps out there, and I mean
Mhm.
there were zillions of apps before the pandemic, and then the pandemic came, and people were shutting down, and lots of virtual instruction and everything. People going remote. Just I don't want to say exacerbated, but I mean it turned that whole environment almost into a feeding frenzy because there's so much out there. There's so many tools out there. The ed tech environment is just fascinating and it's full of really cool stuff, and there's all these companies that are doing these interesting things, and it's easy to get caught up in kind of the flashy, this new app and it does this cool thing and I want to do that,
Yeah.
and it's no fun to think about the student data privacy component of it, or the age restrictions and the
Yeah.
confidentiality and all that nasty stuff that when you're teaching and you want to take this thing and get that student engagement from using this cool tech tool, nobody wants to think about that other stuff,
Right.
because those are I mean, they're two very distinct sides. There are so many apps out. I mean, there's so many apps that it's almost overwhelming.
Mhm. It really
I,
is.
Mhm.
I used to make kind of analogies, like, because technology can do just about anything. It's really interesting and cool that it can do that. There's so much potential there. And I used to tell teachers, like, you're gonna have a Swiss Army knife of tech tools, and you can do anything with that Swiss Army knife. But it's not like I always meant to look up, like, is there a Swiss Army, and do they really use Swiss Army knives? But like in the goofy metaphor, like you're in the Swiss Army and somebody hands you this knife and it's like, this knife is going to let you do anything you need to do. Great. And they hand you a knife and it's got all the tools in it already.
Mhm.
Well, educational apps, it's not like that. Like you get like the knife case, but there's like a
Yeah.
million different tools and you got to pick which ones you're going to shove into your little knife.
Like,
And so it's not
yeah.
really quite that easy. And then here's my grouchy butt in the background, and you're putting your Swiss Army knife of tools together, and I'm like, you can't use half of those because they're not district approved. So
And they're like,
Womp
he's the
womp.
worst.
yeah, womp womp. That's exactly, yeah, that's perfect. Because that does happen, and the way that I've started trying to put it to my staff, for years, people always said time is money, time is money. Well, it's 2021. Time is money still, but data is money too. And student data, there's a lot of money in student data. That's what this entire educational app ecosystem thrives on. And so I've been started telling teachers, like, I want you to think about it in those terms. When you are giving away your data, when you are giving away student data, you are handing that company money. Do you know what they're going to do with it? Do you know how they're spending it? Are they going to improve the product that you're giving them money for? Are they going to, I'm trying to put it in those terms because nobody likes just giving people money. That makes
Right.
people uncomfortable, right?
Right.
Unless you've got so much money that you can do that. And it's a school district. We don't have that much
Right.
money. So it's not a perfect analogy because if we just sit on our student data, it's not like it makes us any money. But that's the way I've started putting it to teachers, because the way that this has worked for years, at least in my experience and around here, you see the same kind of pattern of behavior. The a teacher will email you, or they'll put in a help desk ticket, or they'll catch you in the hallway and be like, "Hey, my kid needs this app. My kids need this app. I tried to put them in the app and I got blocked. So I need you to open this app up." And it's like, all right, we need to step back and unravel that entire sentence for a second, because there's so many things that happened up to that point that I have to think about, that as the teacher, and I know teachers do so much and they are so busy and they are so engaged, that I don't want them to have to do all these pieces, but at the same time, I want to make sure that they're aware that some of these pieces are existing, because the way that
Right.
that whole approach starts, if a teacher comes to me and says, my kids need this app, I tried to get them into it and they were blocked, that means that you got all the way up to the point of trying to hand that app publisher the data money, that data money that I've been trying to tell you about. And then my iron fist of Google said, no, you can't have that. We got all the way to that point where you're reaching out to hand them the money, and I was like, no, stop that. Because we have a formal process in place, just like you were talking about earlier, Carrie, where there's
Yeah.
this form and you fill this form out and you give me some information, and I will go and I will do all the nitty gritty crap of looking at their agreements and their student data privacy handling and all those kinds of things. And if you do it that way, I will tell you, yes, we can use this app. It's fine. I'm confident that we can share our data with these people. Let's go for it. Or I might do what happened to you a couple
Yeah.
times and say, no, they are under 13. We don't have legal agreements for that, blah, blah, blah. But the number of teachers who use that process, which we formally adopted, and it's in there and they have access to it, it's still very low. because so many of these app publishers have good marketing departments,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't. I mean, so they email me all the time, and they email my curriculum director all the time. They email all of us, but it's the teachers that they go after because they like to throw free trials at people, and they like
Right.
to they
Right.
because from the app publisher standpoint, if you give them a free trial and they put their student data in there, it's pretty much free money for them. Not quite that concrete, but it's still so much of student data, and especially with when it comes to behaviors and the way they're engaging with content, all that stuff helps them develop their product, which is why it's like free money to them. So, just side note with that, for tech coordinators, any of them who are listening, if you haven't gone into, if you're a Google Workspace district and you haven't gone into your security settings and changed your API access to approved only, you need to do that right now. Right now. Stop listening to me ramble and go turn that on, because it's just huge. I waited a couple of years before I did it, and you have to, because the 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 app publishers love to just throw their product out there because they want people to use it,
Yeah.
and I don't want to malign them either. They're ed tech people. They're making educational applications and software. So deep down in there somewhere, there are definitely altruistic motives. They want to improve student education and they want to help students succeed. So those are all good things, but they're also a business.
Mm-hmm.
And they're a business that needs to improve their product. They need to make money. They need to turn a profit, all those kinds of things. And student data is one of the huge mechanisms that they do that with. So they throw fish hooks out there to everybody, because if
Yeah.
one teacher
Yeah.
bites and likes the product, and then they tell their friends, and then they
It's
tell their friends, and
Yeah.
I can't
And then
tell
they're all
you
ganging up on you.
exactly. I can't tell you how many of those emails you get, and even the company will do it. They'll send you an email out of the blue. Hey, 23 of your teachers are using my product. You want to talk about a district license? It's like, why are 23 of my teachers using your
yeah.
product? I don't know who you are.
Right.
Because it used to go that way, and it still does sometimes. Because teachers tend to be interested in the tool, or hopefully interested in the outcomes of using the tool, and they don't always think about that data side. I do get some teachers who email me first and they say, "Hey, do we have an app that does this?" Which I really
Hmm.
appreciate, because then they're kind of leaning toward where I'm going to go here in a minute, of what do we already have. But so often the conversation starts with that first one of, I've got this app that I want to use with my students, or that I tried to use with my students and I got blocked. And it's like, you went 3 or 4 steps into the sort of the dark side of the privacy agreement there before to get that far. You were already going over to the dark side, and they're not doing anything bad necessarily, but they're not thinking of
Yeah.
that the student data and the data privacy agreements and all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna say, yeah, I never did. I mean, which
No.
is weird because I thought of it for myself. Like personally, I was cautious of how much I signed up for with like my email address, because I knew they're using it for purposes that I'm not 100% sure about. But I think for me anyway, in school, it's almost kind of like, oh, well, if it's, I don't know, there was just a different thought process behind it, that it was like an educational product. And I didn't think about like the age restrictions or those pieces. So
Right.
I'm glad that
Because
you're,
it's for education, it should be appropriate.
Yeah, who's going
It
to make
should.
an
Yeah.
educational tool that does bad things in the background, or
Right.
yeah.
who's gonna use student data for nefarious purposes? Well,
Apparently,
Yeah,
plenty of
plenty of
people.
people. Yeah,
it
sadly.
well, and it's one of those like, do you have any idea what they're going to use it for? You don't. Okay, maybe you need to pause.
Right.
Because and that's why I put it in terms of money. You're going to hand them student data, which is handing them money. Do you feel confident what that company is going to do with it? And if you don't, it's not that you shouldn't use the app. It's that, all right, we need to ask some more questions, or we need to dig a little bit
Sure.
deeper. By now, ed tech has been a thing for quite some time. I'd like to think that everybody, when they're approaching an app, or when they've got something that they think that they need, hopefully everybody is thinking of it in terms of, what are the educational outcomes that I'm going to get from using this app. That always should be the first question that anybody asks. And I feel like we've come a long way with that. There was earlier on, you know 5, 10 years ago, it was a little bit more Wild Westy, and people would just adopt stuff without even thinking about
Yeah.
it. And there were some horror
Yeah.
stories and cautionary tales. So hopefully everybody starts from that perspective of what do I want to do? What's the end goal here? What is the educational benefit to my students for using this before you even go down that road? But then the second question that I kind of have been really pushing people toward, and it's like it's so boring. It's like the least, there's so many exciting and interesting things in ed tech. It's like the least sexy thing to ask when you're going through this process, but it's like pause for a minute and ask yourself, do you already have a tool that can accomplish that educational goal? Do you
Mm-hmm.
already have something that can do this before you go and you look at all these other flashy apps that involve giving somebody else our data?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right.
the core productivity suites have so much in them. If you're Google Workspace or O365 for education or whatever, there's so much in those alone. And yeah, and like if you're going to be doing daily journaling with your students, just writing in a Google Doc isn't flashy. But
Yeah.
again, if your educational outcome is based on the content, do you need another app to do that when you can do that in Docs and with Google Classroom? Do you need another app? And yeah, the other app might be a little bit more engaging for a couple of minutes, but really, if the content is the same, do we need to give our student data to somebody else? Do
Mm-hmm.
we need to engage all those privacy agreements with somebody else? Do we need to go through and do that evaluation and all those things and then try and incorporate it into our approved ecosystem? Do we need to do all that when you've already got a tool that can do this thing? And we've got everybody's got preferences, and I don't want to totally ignore that, but at the same time, because of that data privacy piece and all those agreements, you can't just give that student data out to everybody. And we run it,
Right.
we have conflicts with that all the time, where this person likes Cami and that person likes no red ink, and it's like, well, we're going to have to pick one
Yeah.
because our
Mm-hmm.
data is going to go into one of them and our data is not going to go into the other. So there's a
Yeah.
process for that, and we can evaluate and do all those kinds of things. But there's no point in having two tools that do similar functions, because you shouldn't be giving all that student data out to two different companies unless you really need to. So it's like super boring to say, instead of looking at that shiny new app that's calling you,
Yeah.
the rep is emailing you and giving you free trials and everything and trying to get your data, instead of going and doing the cool new thing, hey, use the thing you've already been using if it can do it. Like, it's super boring, but it's something that I feel like people need to make sure they take into account. You've got an educational goal you want to pursue. You want to incorporate a technology tool into it. That's awesome. Do you already have something that can do this? Even if you don't know how to do it,
Right.
even
Yeah.
if there's so many resources out there to provide support and training, even though it's never enough. There's great things like Soda, what you guys do, that can help you learn to use the tools that you already have, instead of just flat out going out and finding a new tool. And if it doesn't, and you've got that new tool, great, you found something that you want to investigate. At that point in the process, press pause and get the other parts of the machine involved, whether it's your curriculum director, your technology coordinator, whatever the person who wears those particular
Hat.
the people who wear that particular hat in your school district. Don't go investigating tools in isolation anymore, even if it looks really interesting. You want to play around with it with your staff data, like your individual staff data. That's not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
But before you engage students in that process at all, you need to kind of kick it up the chain a little bit and let the people who are responsible for all the legal mumbo jumbo in the privacy agreements look at it, and you need to let your curriculum director look at it and make sure that it matches all those maps and everything. And like I said, it I don't know, even hearing myself say it just sounds dull and boring.
No, but
No.
it's really important. It really is.
it,
Like,
it is
Yeah.
it is
uh,
hugely important.
And there's a
mm-hmm.
reason for it. And that's what's important to remember too, because it can be frustrating as a teacher because you find these cool things and you want to use them and you're told no. And I think sometimes people feel like they're just being told no because you don't
Yep.
want to deal with it. Not you, but
Yeah, the powers
And
that be.
the tech people don't want to deal with it, or they just say no to everything. But there is a reason. There is a
it's
reason
a
for
hard
it.
balance. It's hard to find the balance, because you want to
Yeah,
encourage teachers who want to innovate. And if
Mm-hmm.
you've got teachers who are not afraid of
absolutely.
tech, because a lot of teachers are hesitant around tech, or they're hesitant to sort of take a risk on something if they haven't used it before. So you get those people who want to innovate and they want to try new things, and you want to encourage that, and you want to help them. You want to be proactive with that kind of thing. You want to seize that momentum, but it's still always got to be tempered a little bit by this unfortunate. It's not really unfortunate. It's just a reality. There's this
Hmm.
security and privacy
Right.
realities in the background, and more parents are expecting sort of transparency with that piece of it. Like, are you really getting the appropriate sort of consent and approvals from your parent population that you have to be getting? And it doesn't help that sort of the federal laws that are guiding this. FERPA has been around for a while, and FERPA doesn't tell you anything with any specificity at all. Like, it's there, and it tells you you can't do these things, but it doesn't define what these things really
These
are at all.
are
It's just blah. And
Right.
really helpful.
yes, it's so helpful every time trying to consult it. And okay, can I do this thing? And there's lots of organizations that are trying to help schools with that. I think it's SDPC or I get their acronym all back, Student Data Privacy Consortium, and stuff like that, where they're trying to help people be more responsible with their agreements. They're trying to help states do a better job with that kind of thing. So you definitely, if you're in the position of having to evaluate and look at these things, definitely, check out that as a resource. But as a teacher, when you're on the ground and you're trying to accomplish a learning objective and you're trying to, ed tech is an easy way to get kind of a big engagement hit because kids love to play with that stuff. They just love
Yeah.
it. So we're,
Sure.
trying to find the balance of encouraging that sort of behavior, but also if you want to go that route, do it a couple weeks in advance. Give your tech people
Yeah.
and your curriculum
Some
people a
time.
couple of minutes to look at it to see, all right, this is okay, or you probably need to be using this, because you hate that dynamic where a teacher gets really excited about an app or a product or something, and they get all jazzed up to use it, and then you tell them, no, I'm sorry, we already have
Mhm.
this other boring thing that you're used to using that does what you need it to do. So can you just use that one because they've already got
Yeah.
our data?
Yeah.
It's not a fun dynamic, but like it is hugely important, and
Necessary.
so much of sort of the ed tech environment there's been a lot of fuel for that because there is all this student data that's flying around, and we've really got to be better about knowing where it's going and what people are doing with it, and who we're sharing it with. Because if you call up a parent and ask them on the phone, "Hey, are you okay with me sharing your kid's student data with everybody under the sun?" That's not that conversation's
Yeah.
not going to go well.
No.
Yeah.
It's
No,
not,
not at
and
all.
and yeah, you're not sharing their personal address necessarily, but people don't even look. We don't. If you want to participate in the tech ecosystem nowadays, we're all just used to giving so much of
So
that data
much.
out.
Yeah.
If you have a phone, your
Yeah.
phone is funneling every behavior of what you do on that phone to a dozen different people. It's just the way it is, and they're all the same. They all do it. Google does it. Microsoft does it. Apple does it. They all do it. They all watch everything you do and track all that data and analyze all of it and do all those things. And that's fine. Everybody sort of accepts that there's a certain amount of that you have to
Hmm.
just be
Sign up
willing to
for. Yeah.
sign up for if you want to
Yeah.
participate in the marketplace. But with students, it gets a lot stickier. And no, I don't know a single parent out there who, if you put it to them that way, are you okay with me sharing your student data with everybody, who would say, oh, yeah, it's great. Like,
Yeah.
no one is going to say that about their student, about their child.
For
Yeah.
sure. Okay. This is just a question because I'm curious
Mhm.
and you're on this side of things. Enlighten me. Why sometimes are things that are blocked for a teacher are not blocked for a student?
Ooh,
Got any
that's
insight
interesting.
on that one? I have this conversation a lot with people like where okay, so for example, we know that YouTube is a Google Workspace app.
Yep,
Some teachers will be blocked from YouTube and yet their students can access it.
that's very interesting.
Now, yeah, is that like on your side of the tech? Is that just something that's a setting that's weird within the realm?
Yeah, that would be
Or
my assumption,
okay.
is that there's something a little funky. When you get into restrictions and content filtering, I that's one more thing we could talk about probably for 20 minutes, because the perception of a content filter is it is infallible. It's going to show my students everything that is good and nothing that is bad, and it's going to let them access everything they need to, and everything that is bad or it will be blocked, and nothing works that way at all.
Right.
They're not perfect. They're all,
No.
the every filter that I've ever used or experienced, they're doing the best that they can. But it's also the internet. So if you want to find something bad, you're
Yeah.
going to find it.
Find
Like,
it.
it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what age you are. It doesn't matter. If you want to find something bad, you're going to find something bad. That's an unfortunate reality. And people respond to that reality in two different ways. Um, they either kind of accept it and go with the filter and say, we'll do the best we can and we'll kind of model with that. Or they go, I will block everything. I
Everything.
will block everything. Um, and we're kind of moving away from that more and more, hopefully. But at the same time, they're not wrong because
Mhm.
because there's so much bad
Right.
stuff out there.
Yeah.
So I would assume in that specific kind of a circumstance, either YouTube is getting blocked for the teachers because it's gotten lumped into a category with something that they considered unprofessional. Like, when March Madness is happening, the internet access in schools always takes a huge hit. And it's like, all right, what's going on there? Like, obviously people are watching games, but we're in a school. We're supposed to be doing all these things. Is it students
Yeah.
watching the games? Is it teachers watching the games? So sometimes you see stuff like that where they're trying to block, fantasy football or things like that, and somehow YouTube kind of got lumped into there by proxy. I guess it's possible that on the Google admin side, they've just turned YouTube off as a service for teachers, which I don't know why you would want to do. YouTube's tricky. It's such a powerful educational resource that I
Mhm.
can't get behind an argument for turning it off.
Yeah.
But it's just like the rest of the internet. There's so much crap on there, and it's so much temptation for a kid to just sit there and watch cat videos or
Yeah.
ridiculous
Yeah.
watching other people play
Sure.
video games, stuff like that. And it's like, well, that could be fun for you when you're on your own time, but don't do that in the middle of class, please.
Right.
Which ultimately is
Right.
not a tech issue. That's a
Yeah.
behavior issue. That's a classroom management kind of a thing. But people tend to look at content filters as a solution to that problem, and they're not really a solution to that problem because of that first thing that I said. It's the internet. If the kid is going to want to be off task,
Yeah.
they don't need YouTube for that. There's a
Mhm.
million other ways that they can be off task. That's not a there's not a tech solution per se to that particular issue. Tech can help a little bit
Yeah.
because tech can help with everything, but it's not the
Right.
ultimate solution. So I would assume that something's a little funky down in there because if your
Okay.
kids have access to YouTube
Yeah.
and the teachers don't, it's like making an argument that YouTube is an educational resource but the teachers don't have access. That's a tough argument to make.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm not like I said, I
Mm-hmm.
was just curious, so I was selfishly asking. So, do you have any tips or tricks that you'd share with other educators or even tech coordinators or
Well, I'll reiterate for the tech coordinators out there that that Google API setting. I'm sure that there is a similar setting on the Microsoft side if you're an O365 environment. But it took me a couple of years to work my way up to being willing to do it because I knew it was there, and this was a couple of years ago now. I knew it was there, but it's very black and white. It's either you allow people to
Yeah.
connect things via API and share their data out without asking you,
oh.
or you don't. And if you flip it to don't, every time somebody tries to use an app that asks them for data, it's going to say no until they come to me. And it's like, in my mind, that was like raising the drawbridge. And it's like, nope, you can't come in. And it felt so severe that I
Mhm.
was afraid it was going to quash anybody who wanted to try anything. And so one summer, I quietly flipped that switch on finally from one year to the next. And it had been eating away at me for a while. And it was like, no, you need to turn this on. Like, on principle, I know I need to turn this on. I just didn't want to because I felt uncomfortable making it that black and white. And then one summer, like I said, I flipped it on, and it was hilarious. I was flipping through because you can go down into Google and you can look at the list of all the different apps out there that you're sharing data with. And some of the stuff that was in that's what convinced me ultimately is I had kids sharing their their district student data with like Taco Bell and Netflix and Fortnite obviously and all these things, and it's like, okay, make an argument
Yeah.
to me that sharing your data with the Taco Bell app is educationally related. Nothing against Taco Bell, but it's like, I gotta turn this on. But find that if you haven't done that already, find that setting and flip it and just set it to approved only. Just do it. Rip the band-aid off because it at that point it
Yeah.
forces all those conversations to come to you. And it's not trying to put your iron fist on things. It's not about control. It's about being responsible with your student data. So from the coordinator side, from the district side or the administrator side, make sure that you have those controls in place. From the teacher side, I promise you, we're not putting those controls in just because we want to be jerks and we want to make you jump through hoops. Nobody wants to do that, but it's necessary to be responsible with that data and to make sure that it's getting shared appropriately. So if you're a teacher and you're hearing this and you're like, "Shut up, you jerk! You're saying you're not letting me do things." I apologize 100%, but at the same time, just try to understand that the reasons behind that are sound and that we have to be. I mean, we are legally obligated to be responsible with those things. And the best thing that you can do from a teacher standpoint is not just to understand that, but to understand that all those sort of the forms and the app approval process and all that stuff, it's all there for these reasons. So use that, engage that machinery. There's no other way to put it. If you find a really cool app and you want to use it, I would love to tell you that every district can be really quick and responsive at analyzing those things, but they just can't. I don't know. I can't make that promise or that guarantee. It may take
Yeah.
6 months for somebody to evaluate that. I don't. Different people have different workloads, and even for me, and it went into, like I said, it went into a feeding frenzy fever pitch during the pandemic because everybody was forced in a lot of instances to go remote or to go virtual, and they didn't have some of the digital resources they need. I know we didn't. So like that first week when we went remote, the number of apps that people wanted to start looking at or using or engaging just exploded. I
Yeah.
was keeping a separate spreadsheet just to kind of keep track of all the requests that were coming in because the need was there.
Yeah.
And it's really hard in that kind of an environment to go through and do that process the way that you want to do it. So the biggest thing I can say for teachers is understand that you're going to need to be patient with app adoptions. You can find this really cool app and you want to use it, and you get that spark where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm teaching this unit next week, this would be so cool. Put that information when you're submitting it for requests. Say, I'm doing this in this project and it would be so great. Can you let me know? But give that person the time to sort of within the frame, the lens of that view of, all right, I know I got this teacher and they really want to use this. Let me see what I can do, because the answer you get back may be the boring one. It may be, I know this is super cool, but you've got this that you can
Yeah.
already do that with, and it's not as flashy as the app. But I mean, that's what we got to do right now. Try and be patient with the tech and the curriculum folks who are making those decisions, because they're not trying to quash your innovative creativity, but
Yeah.
they're just trying to make sure that everybody's being following all the legal obligations that we have with our student data and with our agreements and our privacy and everything else. So try and give them the time to do that process the way that it should be done. Because I mean, everybody has them in place. It's just the reality of it is a lot dirtier than that, because there's so much out there. There are so many tools out there, and so many of them are really interesting and really good, and they do lots of good things. But it all ends up coming back to, you know, educational outcomes. Do you have, using the app, are you going to get the data that can support those outcomes, and is all that data going to be handled appropriately and responsibly? I said it's not fun to talk about. Nobody likes talking about student data. Well, some people do, but most
Mm.
teachers that I know don't like talking about student data privacy. But when you put it to them in those terms, I feel like most of them kind of get that moment of, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
wasn't thinking about that, because they're thinking about their students and they're thinking about
Right.
their classroom and their educational environment.
And how to
Um,
engage and
Right.
yeah,
keep their attention. And yeah.
for sure. So I don't know if that was a tip per se. It was like tip for tech coordinators and also teachers. Please be patient
Yeah.
with us.
Yeah. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
only one way to learn.
Mm.
And for teachers too who are interested in learning more about data and all the things behind it, if you're a documentary watcher, PBS actually has a great documentary called The Human Face of Big Data. I think it was maybe 2011, so a lot has happened since then, but it's kind of an eye opener just in the world of big data. So
Yeah, if you aren't looking, it's crazy when you start to really realize how much data gets collected about every little thing that every one of
yeah.
us does on a day-to-day. It's just, there's so much data, and people do a lot of things with it.
Mm-hmm.
Big companies, small companies, everybody. There's so much data that's being collected about everything.
Yeah. And it's the
Everything.
money.
And every
So,
time you do something new, every time you subscribe or say, yes, agree to these terms, that's what all those terms are saying is, we're going to take your data and we're going to do whatever we want with it. Okay. Okay. Yes, let me in. Let me TikTok. Thank you.
yeah. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
All
Yep.
the
Yep.
things. Well, thank you so much, Josh, for talking with us today.
Thank you guys for having me. This is good.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our discussion today. If you like our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe to get notified when new episodes are released.
For more information about our podcast and to access links and resources referenced in this episode, check us out at fortheloveofedtech.org.